It is the 5th century Britain. The Romans have just left, making way for new kingdoms to dominate Western Europe. Like these barbarians, who despite their intimidating name really just meant that they were non-Roman people. While these barbarians occupied parts of Britain, what remained in the rest of Britain were wizards and legendary beings from British history. That doesn't seem right. Well, that's because this version of history is fictional, so probably none of this ever even happened. Your Majesty. It's a beautiful baby boy. What are you gonna name him? We will name him Arthur was born as the son of King Uther of Britain, who became a single father not long after the Queen's childbirth. As royalty, Arthur would be raised with the best of the best. Servants tended to his every need, and royal chefs prepared him the best, most delicious food in Britain. Just kidding, the Kingdom of Britain was going through a major power struggle, and all the kingdom's nobles wanted to be the next throne sitter. So Arthur, who would be the legitimate heir, had a lot of political enemies. Because of this, Merlin, Britain's magician and the king's advisor, advised the king to send Arthur away to be raised in secret, keeping Arthur safe from the nobles that wanted him dead. Also, the kingdom wasn't just a mess internally. Many barbarian groups across Europe had also been terrorizing Britain, such as the Picts, Scots, and most notably, these guys, also known as the Saxons. But Uther wasn't just gonna let that slide. He was seen as a generous king to his people, but he was a fearsome commander to his enemies and was quickly able to remove the barbarian threats. Until Uther was suddenly poisoned and became deathly ill. Which also took his life soon after. This was a problem. Because Arthur was in hiding and Uther didn't have any other children, there was no clear successor to the kingdom, which meant that the throne was free real estate for the nobles, who all began claiming the throne for themselves. And without Uther's leadership, alliances between nobles began to crumble, and no one could stop them from throwing hands. Also, without a commander to lead Britain's army, the kingdom was unprotected against foreign invasions, so the barbarian tribes who were previously driven away by Uther had their way with the weakened kingdom. Hi everyone, Merlin here. So I know we've had our disagreements, and everyone hates each other, but hear me out. What if we decide who gets to be king through a game? Whoever can pull out this sword from the stone is worthy to be the king of Britain. It's fair for everyone and 100% winnable. Now all of the nobles tried to pull out the sword, but none succeeded. Eventually, even commoners were given a chance, but still, no one was able to take the sword out of the stone. So, fast forward a few years, Arthur, who was now a young teenager, had grown to be a handsome young man who was great in strength and also gentle in manner. He was also a knight in training, receiving lessons in swordsmanship, chivalry, and other knightly skills from his adoptive father and knight, Sir Ector. Hey. On New Year's Eve, a massive tournament was held in London, with the audience being everyone. But because the kingdom was still in chaos after Uther's death, the event was actually meant to just improve relations among the people, particularly among the nobles, who really hated each other. Many knights also participated in the tournament, including Sir Ector and his son, Arthur's adoptive brother, Sir Kay. Arthur was also brought along, but he was only a spectator since he wasn't officially a knight yet. During the tournament, Sir Kay realized that he forgot his sword at home, and not wanting to show up swordless to such a big event, he asked Arthur to get his sword for him. But as he went home, he realized the house was locked, and he didn't know where he'd find a sword lying around. Then he suddenly remembered something he'd seen earlier that day. This'll do. Sir Kay, immediately realizing what it was, ran to Sir Ector, claiming that he pulled out the sword himself. But Sir Ector didn't believe it, so he brought them back to the churchyard and placed the sword in the stone again. Both he and Kay tried to pull it out. No luck. Then Arthur stepped forward, grabbed the hilt, and pulled it out effortlessly. News spread quickly about a nameless boy who pulled out the fabled sword, and unsurprisingly, none of the nobles were happy to hear this. How could he be the king? He doesn't even have a beard! What are you looking at? So to prove Arthur's legitimacy, they put the sword in a stone, and once again, no one was able to pull it out except for Arthur. And like that, Arthur became the king of Britain. But now that Arthur was king, the problem that were once his father's were now his. Britain was still being ravaged by their neighbors, and worse, many of the nobles who were dissatisfied with Arthur becoming king staged a rebellion against him. So Arthur approached Merlin and asked for a more powerful weapon to chastise these rebels terribly. And that they did. Merlin brought Arthur to a lake where a lady in white was floating in the center holding a gleaming sword. Arthur rode his way to the lady, asked for the weapon, and she offered it to him. But in return, Arthur owed her a favor that she could call him any time in the future. But that's a later story. With that, Arthur now had Excalibur. However, even with Excalibur, Arthur's army stood no chance against the rebels who had 60,000 men compared to Arthur's mere 20,000. Knowing that they were hopelessly outmatched, Arthur ordered Merlin to request help from the neighbors, King Ban of Benwick and King Bors of Gannis, which is basically modern-day France.
Bonjour, baguette.
They agreed to help and sent a total of 10,000 men to aid Arthur in the battle. Now 30,000 was still not nearly enough to compete against the alliance's 60,000 men, but Arthur had the element of surprise. Instead of combining his forces with the allied forces, he hid the 10,000 reinforcements in a valley north of the battlefield. So when the battle began, the enemy was hit with a pincer attack, catching the alliance off guard and overwhelming their army. By the end of the skirmish, the alliance had merely 1/4 of their militia left, while Arthur and his allies had suffered minimal casualties. Knowing the alliance was no longer able to fight, Arthur withdrew with an overwhelming victory, and the revolt was over. Shortly after the revolt, Arthur received word that King Leodegrance was being besieged by enemy forces and requested help from Arthur. Who's King Leodegrance? He was a vassal to King Uther, which meant Leodegrance received land from Uther in exchange for his loyalty and service. In other words, Leodegrance's land was also Arthur's land. And so, Arthur brought his army to Camelard, where Leodegrance was under fire. They were quickly able to send the enemy army running back home, saving Leodegrance from certain death. And as a sign of gratitude, Leodegrance invited Arthur and his men to a grand feast where he meets his friend's daughter, Lady Guinevere, for the first time. And it was love at first sight. Your Majesty, I'm busy right now. There's 600 ships coming right to us. Wow, our kingdom just had a huge civil war, and it looks like there were a lot of casualties. It would really suck if someone were to invade us right now. And that's exactly what happened. The Saxons had remained in power overseas even after Arthur's father had driven them out of Britain. And they were back to reclaim what they had lost years ago. Their sudden invasion caught Britain off guard, raiding and pillaging many cities off the south and eastern coast. But Arthur wasted no time. He rallied his forces against the foreign invaders, and after several battles along with Excalibur's strength, Arthur eventually drove back the Saxons who fled to the forest of Celadon. Alright, here's the plan. We'll wait here and use the trees as cover. The moment they come in here, we'll cut down the trees around them, and then Boss? Unfortunately for them, Arthur saw through their plan and ordered his men to cut down the trees first, crushing many Saxons and trapping the rest. Now surrounded and with nowhere to run, the Saxons surrendered and promised to leave Britain.
Psych!
Well, the Saxons were back for round 2, and with more spunk than before. Their sudden return also caught Arthur off guard, who hadn't realized that they had already taken multiple towns. And obviously, he was pretty angry knowing that they had broken their promise, and finally realized why they were called the B word. But Arthur had a major advantage this time. He knew the Saxons' tactics and was able to outplay them in both strategy and strength. Because of this, his army eventually cornered the Saxons on top of Mount Badon, where they would have their final battle. This time, there was no mercy. Arthur besieged the hill for 2 days before they mercilessly slaughtered the Saxon invaders, driving them out of Britain for good.